The great hall of the Celestial Council stretched so far that the roof disappeared into clouds of golden light, and the floor shimmered like glass reflecting 1,000 stars. Tonight was no ordinary night. From every corner of the galaxy, ships had arrived carrying rulers, warriors, and nobles from 10,000 species. They had all come for one reason: an alien girl whose beauty and bloodline were said to be unmatched in all living worlds. She stood at the center of the stage, tall and graceful, her silver hair glowing faintly under the crystal lights. Her eyes, violet like twin galaxies, scanned the endless crowd. Her name was Leora, daughter of the High Matriarch, destined to unite empires by choosing a mate. But inside her heart she felt the heavy weight of chains. To her people she was not a girl, she was a prize. To the galaxy she was not free. She was a symbol of power. The noise in the hall was deafening. Giant creatures from volcanic worlds pounded their chests, shouting their worth. Slender insect-like rulers sang in high tones, promising entire fleets. Reptilian warlords hissed, speaking of treasure and planets they would lay at her feet. Each suitor wanted her, but none truly saw her. To them, she was a jewel, a crown, a weapon. She smiled politely, but inside she longed for something else. She longed for honesty, for a presence that was not wrapped in lies or greed. The announcer, a tall being with 6 arms, raised his voice. Tonight, the daughter of the matriarch will look upon her suitors. 10,000 species have come, 10,000 offers of wealth, armies, and power. The galaxy itself waits for her choice. The hall shook with applause. Thunderous roars echoed from creatures taller than towers. Whispers spread among the crowd. Everyone wondered which empire she would favor. If she chose wrongly, wars would begin. If she chose wisely, peace might last for centuries. Leora's gaze moved slowly from one row to another. She saw creatures of fire, beings of water contained in shimmering suits, winged hunters with eyes sharp as blades. All of them wanted to be chosen. Yet to her, all of them felt the same. And then she saw him. He stood far at the back, silent, almost unnoticed among the roaring giants. A man, human, dressed not in shining armor but in simple dark clothes. His hair was unkempt, his boots dusty from travel. He did not shout his name. He did not raise his hands. He simply stood there watching as if this grand gathering meant nothing to him. Leora felt her breath catch for the first time that night. 1,000 alien nobles had praised themselves, but this one man remained silent. His eyes were calm, steady, and strangely human. There was no greed in them, no hunger for her crown. She noticed his hands, scarred, rough, marked by battles and work. Unlike the polished claws and jeweled fingers of the other suitors, his hands told a story of survival, of real struggle. Her heart stirred, though she tried to hide it. The announcer continued, introducing noble after noble. A warrior from the steel worlds lifted a mountain axe and roared. A queen of crystal beings offered fleets of diamond warships. Each speech was more grand than the last. The crowd cheered louder and louder, but the human never moved, never spoke. He was like a quiet rock in a storm. Some aliens noticed him at last and laughed. What is that creature doing here? A human, they are fragile. They cannot survive in deep space without machines. Another hissed, a weakling among titans. Does he think he can stand beside the matriarch's daughter? The laughter spread, cruel and mocking, yet the man did not answer. He simply adjusted the strap of the worn bag on his shoulder and kept watching. Leora's lips curved in the faintest secret smile. The others mocked him, but she felt something different. She did not see weakness. She saw courage and silence. The hall roared again as the trials were announced. To win her hand, suitors would face tests of strength, endurance, and courage. One by one, they would prove their worth before the galaxy. Excitement filled the air. The nobles raised their weapons, the rulers lifted their banners, and the crowd's voices shook the very walls of the hall. But Leora's eyes returned again to that quiet figure at the back. She did not know his name. She did not know his world. But in a sea of 10,000 proud voices, only his silence called to her. And in that silence, a dangerous thought grew in her heart. What if she chose him? The fate of empires hung in the air, but all she could hear was the quiet heartbeat of the one being who refused to kneel. The next day, the trials began. The great hall had been transformed into a colossal arena, with shifting floors, blazing lights, and hovering cameras that sent the spectacle to every corner of the galaxy. Crowds filled the balconies, banners of alien empires waving high, each hoping that their champion would earn the girl's hand. The air was heavy with the smell of smoke, oil, and alien pheromones. Leora sat on her golden seat high above, her face calm but her heart restless. She watched as one by one suitors entered the arena, each eager to prove strength. Some carried weapons that shone like suns, others wore armor made from rare metals. Each declared promises of protection and power, their voices echoing with confidence. The crowd cheered, roared, and hissed, but she kept stealing glances toward the back where the human still stood silent. He had not moved much since last night. He did not join the others in boasting. He did not step forward to impress. When the announcer called for introductions, he spoke only his name, short, plain, and human. His voice carried no weight of arrogance, no melody of alien pride. Just steady words. The crowd laughed again. Is that all? No title? No empire behind him? One alien shouted, his claws clacking. Another bellowed, "He must be mad to stand among us." The laughter spread like wildfire, but the human showed no reaction. He simply stood with his arms folded, his gaze focused on the trials ahead. Leora leaned slightly forward, her lips parting. Why was he here? What did he want? Unlike the others, he had not even once looked at her with desire or greed. Instead, his eyes moved across the arena, sharp and alert, like a soldier preparing for survival. The first trial began. The floor cracked open, revealing a pit filled with burning plasma rivers. Platforms rose and fell randomly, each one threatening to throw challengers into the flames. The task was simple: reach the other side alive. A reptilian warlord leaped across, his heavy armor clanging, his tail whipping for balance. He roared proudly when he landed, drawing cheers. Insectoid nobles darted quickly, their wings buzzing to keep them steady. Giants of stone moved slowly but carefully, their weight shaking the platforms. When it was the human's turn, silence fell. All eyes turned toward him. Many expected him to fall instantly. He stepped onto the first platform, light and balanced, his movements cautious. He did not rush. He studied the rhythm of the rising and sinking platforms. Then, with sharp calculation, he moved, each step timed perfectly. Where others relied on brute strength or alien physiology, he relied on pattern, patience, and instinct. Gasps rose from the balconies as he crossed halfway without a single stumble. Even the announcer faltered in his speech. Near the end, one platform tilted suddenly, sending a hulking alien crashing into the flames. The crowd cried out in horror, but the human had seen it coming. He leaped aside at the last second, catching the edge of another platform with scarred hands. His fingers gripped tight, his muscles straining, but he pulled himself up and continued until he reached the end. Silence held the arena for a long moment. Then slowly a few voices cheered. More followed. Soon even those who mocked him earlier clapped reluctantly. Leora's chest tightened as she watched him. Her heart had skipped when he almost fell, and relief rushed through her when he pulled himself up. Why did she care so much for a stranger? The announcer's voice boomed. The human survives the trial. The crowd erupted again, half in disbelief, half in excitement, but the human did not bow or boast. He did not raise his arms in victory. He simply walked back to his place, as if crossing a pit of death was nothing unusual. His silence was louder than any roar. Other trials followed. Tests of strength, where giants bent steel bars. Tests of speed, where insectoids darted through lightning storms. Tests of endurance, where warriors stood against walls of crushing gravity. Again and again, the human adapted. He was never the strongest, never the fastest, but he endured, he thought. He survived. And survival was something even the proudest nobles respected deep down. Still, many mocked him. Some called him lucky. Others swore he cheated. But Leora could see the truth. This man was not lucky. He was skilled in ways they could not understand. That night, when the trials ended, Leora left her seat with heavy thoughts. Nobles swarmed around her, praising their performances, begging for her attention, offering ships and planets. But her mind was elsewhere. She slipped away quietly, her guards unaware, and walked down the empty corridors behind the arena. The sounds of the crowd faded. The air was cooler here, the torches dim, and then she saw him. The human sat on a stone bench alone, wrapping a bandage around his hand. The skin was raw from gripping the sharp platform edges. He did not complain. He did not even sigh. His movements were steady, practiced, as though wounds were nothing new. For the first time, Leora stepped closer. Her voice, soft yet firm, broke the silence. Why are you here? she asked. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers, calm, steady. The same silence that had followed him in the arena now surrounded them both. I didn't come for you, he said finally. His voice was low, plain, but it struck her like thunder. Her breath caught. Then why stand among them? He finished tying the bandage, his eyes never leaving hers. To remind your galaxy that humans don't kneel, the words sank into her like fire. 10,000 voices had tried to impress her with promises. But only this man's silence and now his truth made her heart tremble. And for the first time, she realized her choice might already be made. The second day of trials arrived with a different kind of weight. The first challenges had tested balance, speed, and survival, but now came the trials that mattered most. Strength, endurance, and courage. These were the measures by which empires respected their champions. The balconies were more crowded than ever, with alien leaders leaning forward eagerly, their jeweled eyes gleaming. For them, this was more than entertainment. This was a battlefield of pride. Leora sat at her seat once again, her hands folded in her lap. She tried to look calm as her people expected from their princess, but her heart was not calm at all. She could not stop thinking about the words of the human from last night. Humans don't kneel. Simple words, but heavier than all the polished speeches she had heard. They had echoed in her mind while she lay awake, and now as the arena came alive, her eyes sought him again. He stood in his usual way, quiet, steady, apart from the others. Alien nobles around him flexed their muscles, raised their weapons, and roared to stir fear in their rivals. But the human did nothing. He only checked the wraps around his wrists and adjusted his boots. He looked like a man preparing for a long day's work, not a grand trial witnessed by half the galaxy. The announcer's voice thundered. The trial of beasts. The arena floor rumbled, then opened wide. From the dark pits below, cages rose, shaking violently. The sound of claws scraping metal echoed like thunder. Gasps rippled through the audience as the cages burst open. Out poured monstrous creatures, giant predators from across worlds. Some had 6 legs and mouths full of fangs, others wings that dripped poison, and some were made of stone and fire. The task was brutal. Survive the beasts and bring down at least one. The reptilian warlord charged first, his axe slicing the air, his scales flashing in the firelight. He brought down a horned predator with a single strike, roaring for the crowd. The insectoid queen darted through the air, weaving between snapping jaws, her claws cutting deep into another monster. The arena filled with chaos, screams, roars, and the clash of alien steel against flesh. Then the human stepped forward. For a moment, laughter rose from the balconies. He will be eaten alive in seconds, one noble hissed. Watch closely, for this is the end of the fragile creature. But the human moved differently. He did not rush like the reptilian, nor did he dart like the insectoid. He stayed low, studying, waiting. His eyes tracked every beast's movement, every twitch of their tails, every sound of claws against the floor. When a 3-headed predator lunged toward him, jaws snapping, the human rolled under its attack. The crowd gasped as the beast's head smashed into the ground where he had stood. With speed born not of power but of instinct, he leaped onto its back, gripping tight with scarred hands. He drew no blade of shining metal, no weapon of alien design, only a simple knife strapped to his belt. With it, he cut deep into the softer flesh between the monster's armored plates. The predator shrieked in agony, thrashing wildly. The human clung on, his teeth gritted, his muscles burning. He struck again and again, not with elegance but with stubborn will. Finally, the beast collapsed, its head slamming to the ground. The arena went silent for a moment. Then slowly applause began. First soft, then louder, until the sound thundered through the hall. Leora had risen from her seat without realizing it. Her heart pounded as she watched him, blood dripping from his knife, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. But he did not lift his arms for glory. He did not shout in triumph. He simply stepped back, breathing, eyes steady, ready for the next challenge. The announcer's voice boomed again, louder now. The human survives. The human conquers the beast. The crowd roared, half in disbelief, half in awe. But many nobles were not pleased. She could see their narrowed eyes, their clenched jaws. To them, this was an insult. A human, a race they had long considered weak, daring to compete with their greatest champions. The trials continued. Other beasts fell to alien blades, and some challengers were dragged screaming into the pits, their blood staining the arena floor. The smell of death filled the air. But Leora's eyes never left the human. Each time he moved, her breath caught. Each time he endured, her chest tightened. She could not deny it anymore. She wanted him to win. By the end of the day, only a fraction of the suitors remained. The strongest, the cleverest, the most determined. And among them stood the human, his knife still stained, his clothes torn, but his back straight. That night, when the trials ended, the palace buzzed with whispers. Some nobles claimed the human had cheated. Others swore he had been blessed by luck. But deep down, everyone had seen the truth. He had survived because he refused to give up. Leora walked the quiet halls of her chambers, her thoughts racing. She should have been thinking about alliances, about her duty to her people, about the wars that might break out if she chose poorly. But her mind kept circling back to him. His silence in the hall, his words in the corridor, his courage in the arena. She sat by the window, gazing at the endless stars. 10,000 suitors had come with wealth, armies, and power. But only one had come with nothing, and still managed to stand tall. And she knew deep inside that her heart had already chosen. But how could she tell her people? How could she tell the galaxy that, among 10,000 species, she wanted only the human? The palace corridors stretched long and cold that night. Guards in shining armor patrolled every corner, their spears glowing faintly with power. Yet despite all the light, shadows clung to the walls like secrets waiting to be spoken. Leora walked swiftly, her heart pounding louder than her footsteps. She had dismissed her attendants earlier, claiming she needed silence to meditate before the next day's trials. But meditation was the last thing on her mind. She wanted to see him, the human who refused to kneel. All day she had watched him endure beasts that could swallow armies. He had no armor of diamond, no sword of fire, no shield blessed by gods. He had only his will, and still he stood when so many others had fallen. The image of him clinging to the monster's back, refusing to let go even when the beast thrashed like thunder, was burned into her memory. She found him where she suspected he would be, alone, in one of the quiet gardens behind the arena. The palace gardens were meant for noble guests, full of glowing flowers, whispering fountains, and silver paths that shimmered under the twin moons. But he sat on the edge of the fountain like a weary traveler, not a suitor for the galaxy's most desired bride. His shirt was torn, his arm freshly bandaged, his boots covered in dust. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring into the water as if the ripples held answers. For a moment, Leora simply watched him. He was different from all others. No arrogance, no desperate hunger in his eyes. He seemed human, and that was what made her chest ache strangely. She stepped closer, her voice soft. "You are injured." He looked up, his eyes catching hers in the moonlight. They were steady, just as before, but softer now, as if the silence between them carried more weight than words. "It's nothing," he said. "Just scratches." "You fought a creature 3 times your size," she replied. "And you call it nothing." He gave the faintest shrug. "Where I come from, surviving is nothing special. It's just life." Her lips curved in the smallest smile. "Your people must be strong." For the first time, his gaze drifted from hers, turning back to the water. "Not strong in the way you mean. We bleed, we break, we fall. But we get up again. That's what humans are." Leora's heart tightened. She had grown up surrounded by species that prized power above all. To them, weakness was shame, failure was death. Yet here was a man who spoke of falling without shame, as if it were natural. "Why did you join the trials?" she asked, her voice quieter now. He paused, his reflection rippling in the fountain's water. Then he said the words again, the same ones that haunted her since yesterday. "Not for you. Not for power. I came to remind them. Humans don't kneel." She stepped closer, her gown brushing the silver stones. "And if I choose you?" He looked at her again, this time with a strange expression. His eyes were not filled with pride or excitement. Instead, they carried something else, something heavier. "Then your galaxy will turn on you," he said bluntly. "Your nobles will call it betrayal. Your allies will call it madness. And your enemies, they will call it war." The words cut through her like ice. She knew he spoke the truth. 10,000 species had gathered not just for her beauty, but for her choice. Whoever she picked would gain power, and whoever she rejected would burn with rage. Choosing a human, an outsider with no empire, no armies, would be seen as an insult to all of them. "And yet," she whispered almost to herself, "I do not want them. I want, her words caught in her throat. She stopped herself before the truth slipped out. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of water and the soft hum of alien flowers glowing in the night. Finally, he stood. He was taller than she realized, his shadow cast long across the fountain. You don't want me, he said, his tone steady. You think you do, but you don't. To choose me is to choose exile. To choose me is to choose a fight you don't need. Her violet eyes met his, sharp now. You do not get to tell me what I want, she said firmly. I have been told what to do my entire life. Who to smile at, who to ignore, who to marry. And for once I will decide. His jaw tightened. For the first time, his calm wavered. She could see the struggle in him, the desire to push her away and the deeper desire not to. Before either of them could say more, the sound of footsteps echoed from the corridor. Voices, rough and angry, broke the fragile moment. We cannot allow this human to continue. If she favors him, everything we've built will crumble. One alien hissed. Another growled. Then he must not survive tomorrow's trial. The voices faded as the conspirators walked on. Unaware that they had been overheard, Leora's breath quickened. She looked back at the human, fear flashing in her eyes. But he only sighed as if he had expected this. They'll come for me, he said calmly. Then I will stop them, she whispered fiercely. He shook his head. No, if you try, they'll turn on you too. Let them come. I'll endure. She stared at him, torn between duty and the fire rising in her chest. She had never felt so powerless and yet so alive. And as the moon shone down, she realized something terrifying. For the first time in her life, she wanted to fight. Not for her people, not for her throne, but for him. The next morning, the arena felt heavier than before. The crowd was restless, buzzing with whispers that spread like wildfire. Something was different today. The banners of rival empires fluttered with sharper tension, and the nobles sitting on jeweled thrones leaned forward as though expecting blood. Leora sat on her high seat, her face calm as stone, though inside her chest her heart pounded. She had not slept. The words she had overheard in the corridor echoed in her mind, plans to remove the human before he could rise any further. She had seen assassins' eyes before, but never aimed at one man alone. And there he was, standing quietly in the arena below. His clothes were the same, his boots worn, his face steady. If he knew that powerful nobles wanted him dead, he gave no sign. He simply adjusted the straps on his hands and looked toward the next trial as though preparing for any ordinary task. But Leora knew. This was no ordinary trial. The announcer's voice rang out, booming across the arena. The trial of blades. The floor shifted again and weapons rose from hidden compartments. Blades forged from alien alloys, axes twice the size of a man, spears glowing with plasma, and even whips of energy. Each suitor was expected to choose their weapon, then face a challenger in combat. Strength, skill, and spirit would be tested. Nobles cheered as reptilian warlords grabbed heavy axes, insectoid nobles seized spears, and crystalline champions lifted swords that sang with light. But when the human walked past the racks, he ignored most of the shining tools. At last he picked up a plain iron sword, old and unimpressive, its edge nicked with use. Laughter burst from the balconies. He chooses scrap metal, one noble sneered. He doesn't even know the value of weapons. Another jeered, but Leora's lips pressed into a hidden smile. She understood. It wasn't the weapon, it was the hands that held it. The first fights began. A reptilian swung his axe and shattered the shield of his foe, roaring in victory. The insectoid queen darted and struck with her plasma spear, her opponent falling in sparks. One by one, battles ended in cheers and blood. Then the announcer called the human's name. His opponent stepped forward, a towering alien from the molten worlds, chosen by the very nobles who whispered last night. His armor glowed like lava, his sword heavy enough to crush stone. The crowd cheered wildly. They already knew what was about to happen. The duel began. The molten warrior charged, swinging with brutal strength. The human stepped aside, narrowly avoiding the strike. Dust exploded where the blade struck the floor. Another swing came, faster this time. Again, the human dodged, his movements sharp and minimal. He wasn't fighting with brute strength. He was reading his enemy, letting the giant exhaust himself. But then the trap came. As the molten warrior feigned a stumble, another figure moved in the shadows. A hidden drone, disguised as part of the arena, shifted position. Its eyes glowed red, its energy core ready to fire. Leora's heart froze. This was no fair trial. The nobles had twisted the rules. The human's eyes flicked toward the corner just for a second, but it was enough. The molten warrior swung his blade with killing intent. Gasps rose as the human barely blocked, his plain sword ringing under the force. He staggered back, his arms straining. The drone moved closer, its core beginning to burn bright. "No," Leora whispered, gripping the railing of her seat. Her fingers dug so hard that the gold bent. She rose suddenly. Her voice, sharp and commanding, cut through the chaos. "Stop this!" The announcer froze, shocked. The crowd murmured in confusion. Nobles shifted uncomfortably, their plots almost revealed. But before anyone could act, the human made his move. As the molten warrior raised his weapon again, the human shifted low, using his small frame to slip past. With a sharp strike, his plain sword found the weak point in the armor, just under the glowing plates. Sparks burst as the molten warrior roared in pain and fell. The crowd erupted in shock. The human had won, again, but he wasn't done. With a swift motion, he hurled his sword like a spear. It flew across the arena, striking the drone before it could fire. The machine exploded in sparks, pieces scattering across the sand. Now the whispers turned to shouts. "Cheating!" Some screamed. "Assassination!" Others roared. Leora stood tall, her violet eyes blazing. "Who placed a killing drone in my arena?" she demanded. Her voice echoed like thunder. No one answered. Nobles avoided her gaze, their jeweled masks hiding fear. Below, the human retrieved his sword calmly, his face unreadable. He did not bow to the cheers, nor did he look up at her. But she knew. He had heard her voice, and for that moment their defiance had joined as one. The announcer, sweating, finally declared, "The human, victorious!" Cheers erupted, but they were mixed with anger. Some clapped with awe, others shouted with rage. The hall was no longer united. That night, the palace was restless. Rumors spread of sabotage, betrayal, and conspiracy. Some claimed the nobles had tried to murder the human because they feared him. Others whispered that Leora herself had broken tradition by interfering. In her chambers, Leora paced. She had crossed a line. By speaking out, she had revealed where her heart leaned. And she knew the nobles would not forgive her for it. But when she closed her eyes, she could still see him. Calm, steady, standing tall with nothing but a scarred sword and stubborn will. For the first time, she realized something deeper. It wasn't just her heart that had chosen. It was her destiny. And that destiny had just painted a target on both of them. The grand hall had never been so silent. The air was thick, heavy, as though even the galaxy itself was holding its breath. 10,000 nobles, warlords, and emperors had gathered again, their banners glowing, their jeweled crowns sparkling under the crystal light. But this time there was no laughter, no roars of pride. Instead, there was tension sharp enough to cut steel. At the center of it all stood Leora. She wore the ceremonial robes of her people, woven from threads that shimmered like starlight. Her silver hair was braided high, her violet eyes glowing faintly with the power of her lineage. She looked calm, regal, yet beneath the surface her heart raced like a trapped bird. Today was the day of the choice. The announcer's 6 arms rose, his booming voice echoing across the hall. The daughter of the High Matriarch has watched the trials. She has seen strength, courage, and sacrifice. Now she will choose her mate. 10,000 suitors stand ready. The crowd erupted in thunderous cheers, banners whipping, voices shaking the walls. For many, this was the moment they had waited for their entire lives. One decision would decide the future of empires. One by one, champions stepped forward. The reptilian warlord pounded his chest, his scales gleaming like molten metal. "Choose me, daughter of the matriarch. My armies will burn your enemies to ash." The insectoid queen spread her wings, her voice high and sharp. "Choose me. My fleets will surround your throne with unbreakable shields." The crystalline monarch raised his jeweled blade, light scattering into rainbows. "Choose me. Together we will rule not just the galaxy, but time itself." Each promise was more grand than the last. Wealth, power, armies, entire worlds, they threw everything at her feet. The crowd roared approval after each, and yet to Leora, all their words sounded hollow. Her gaze drifted again, as it always did, to the one figure who stood quietly at the back, the human. He did not raise his arms. He did not boast of armies he did not have. He did not even step forward. He simply stood, silent, his plain clothes torn from the trials, his scarred hands folded. His calm eyes met hers, steady and unshaken. The nobles noticed where her eyes lingered, and whispers spread like fire. No, she wouldn't. Impossible. A human? But in Leora's chest the decision had already been made. She had seen 10,000 voices shouting for her, but only one silence had spoken to her heart. The announcer raised his voice again. Daughter of the matriarch, step forward. Make your choice. The hall grew still. Even the banners seemed to freeze. Leora walked slowly to the edge of the platform, her footsteps echoing through the silence. Her violet eyes swept over the crowd of suitors. Some smiled confidently, others clenched their fists. All of them waited for her word. Her voice rang clear, calm, unshaken. I have seen your strength. I have heard your promises, but I seek none of them. I do not want treasures. I do not want armies. I do not want titles. I want courage. I want truth. She lifted her hand slowly, deliberately. For one heartbeat, the galaxy seemed to stop. Then her hand pointed, not to a king, not to a warlord, not to a queen, but to the human. Gasps exploded across the hall. The silence shattered into chaos. Nobles shouted, some in outrage, others in disbelief. The reptilian warlord roared in fury. You insult us all! The insectoid queen's wings trembled with rage. The crystalline monarch's jeweled blade cracked in his grip, but Leora did not waver. Her voice rose above the storm. I choose the human. Her words echoed, unshaken, carried across every corner of the hall. The announcer faltered, his 6 hands trembling. Never in the history of the galaxy had a choice like this been made. A human, a race outsiders mocked as fragile, chosen above empires. The nobles turned their fury on the human now. Kill him, some shouted. Remove this insult. This cannot stand. Guards surged forward, weapons raised. But before they could strike, Leora lifted her hand. A violet glow burst from her palm, energy filling the hall. Her power, rare and unchallenged, stopped even the bravest warriors in their tracks. Touch him, she warned, her voice sharp as a blade. And you defy me. You defy the matriarch's line. The hall froze again. No one dared move. The human, still silent, finally stepped forward. He did not smile. He did not bow. He only stood beside her, his presence alone enough to shake alien pride. He looked up at her once as if asking if she was certain. Her steady gaze gave the answer. Yes. For the first time, the hall saw something they had never imagined. A human standing not below, not behind but beside the galaxy's most powerful daughter. The chaos did not end. Warships outside the palace began to ready themselves. Nobles whispered of rebellion. Leaders prepared for betrayal. But Leora stood tall, the human at her side, and she declared once more, My choice is made. And with those words, the galaxy's future cracked open like glass, for a storm of war and change was about to fall. The great hall had turned into a storm. Voices clashed like thunder. Banners shook like torn sails in a hurricane. Nobles screamed, warlords roared, and queens hissed with venom. Never in living memory had such a choice been made. The daughter of the High Matriarch had picked not an emperor, not a king, not a champion of a great species, but a human. A man with no armies, no wealth, no throne. Outside, the skies above the palace burned with the glow of warships. Fleets belonging to rival empires hovered restlessly, their cannons humming, their commanders waiting for the signal to strike. It felt as though one spark would set the entire galaxy ablaze. And yet, in the center of it all, Leora stood tall. The human stood beside her, silent but steady, his presence grounding her in the chaos. She felt the heat of 1,000 angry eyes, but she no longer feared them. For the first time she was not alone. Silence, the announcer cried, but his voice was drowned in the uproar. The hall trembled under the weight of fury. Then Leora raised her hand, violet energy radiating outward like a wave. The power of her bloodline silenced the chamber in an instant. Nobles froze, guards lowered their weapons, even the banners seemed to fall still. Her voice rang across the hall, calm yet sharp. I have made my choice. You came here with treasures, armies, and promises, but none of you brought truth. None of you brought courage. Only he did. That is why I chose him. The reptilian warlord bared his fangs. He is nothing. He cannot protect you. He cannot lead your people. Her eyes blazed violet fire. You are wrong. He is not nothing. He is everything you are not. He has no crown, no fleets, no fortune, and yet he stood where many of you fell. That is strength. That is leadership. The insectoid queen shrieked. You defy the balance of the galaxy? You invite war. Leora's voice cut her off. Then let war come. I will not chain myself to a liar, a tyrant, or a beast. I would rather face the galaxy with him than live a life of slavery to your empires. A stunned silence followed. For the first time, many nobles faltered. They had expected a frightened girl bound by duty. Instead, they saw a queen being born before their eyes. The human finally spoke, his voice low but carrying across the hall. I didn't come to be chosen. I didn't come to be crowned. But if she stands with me, then I will stand with her. And if the galaxy wants a war for it, his scarred hands tightened into fists. Then let them find out what humans are made of. The words rippled like fire through the chamber. For a moment, there was only silence. Then chaos returned, but this time it was different. Half the hall roared in fury, the other half in awe. Some nobles still screamed betrayal, but others whispered that perhaps the girl's choice was destiny. Outside, warships adjusted formation. Armies prepared for conflict. Yet, even in the face of rising war, Leora felt calm. She looked at the human beside her, his steady presence anchoring her heart. Later that night, in the quiet of the palace balcony, they stood together under the twin moons. The noise of the angry galaxy still rumbled beyond the walls, but here there was only stillness. You've changed everything, he said softly. No, she replied, her violet eyes shining as they met his. We changed everything. For a long time they said nothing more. The stars stretched endlessly above them, vast and unbroken, a reminder of the trials ahead. She knew wars would come. Empires would rise against them. Assassins would hunt them both. Her choice had torn open the future like a wound, and yet for the first time in her life, Leora did not feel like a prisoner of her destiny. She felt free. She turned to him, her voice steady. They offered me 10,000 choices, but none of them mattered. I wanted only the one who would not kneel. His eyes softened. For a man who had always stood in silence, his answer was simple. Then you have me. The galaxy beyond their balcony braced for fire and war. But here, in this small moment, a new beginning was born. Not of wealth, not of crowns, but of courage and truth. And though neither of them said it aloud, both knew the galaxy would never be the same again.